Hello, Spark fans, and welcome back to Advancing Spark, brought to you by Advancing Analytics. And today we've gone a different direction. So, I've had a conversation just now with Denny Lee and Johnathan Brito from Databricks about the brand new feature of Managed Iceberg. Kind of give me an idea of what it's for, what the features are, timescales, how it works, all of that good stuff. Now, obviously, like me, you probably got lots of questions going. Why? What does that mean for Delta? What should I use in which scenarios? All of the questions. What does performance look like? So I got the chance to ask all of these questions to the guys, and that's essentially what this video is. So we're going to switch over, show you the interview, show you when we actually talked about, and hopefully answer most of your questions. It's a bit of a long one. As usual, me and Denny go for a bit of a waffle, but hopefully it is useful and answers all your questions. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the video. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. Welcome to the show. I want to do a quick round of intros. So, guys.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So Jonathan Brito, I'm a product manager here at Databricks. I lead a lot of our efforts related to Iceberg interoperability and storage formats broadly. It's great to have you. Great to meet you guys on the call.
Hey everybody,
Yeah, welcome.
I'm back here. This is Denny, here to bug Simon and introduce Brito. Brito's the AI who actually knows what he's talking about. I'll just do my usual dance. If you don't know who I am, I'm sorry, or maybe that's a good thing. I'm a Delta maintainer, Databricks employee, and Iceberg contributor. So that's what you need to know. Bam.
Awesome. I mean, it's quite rare that, me and Denny have someone who actually knows what they're talking about with us. It's good.
I know it's odd. It's odd. I feel weird right now, like the fact that we actually have something knowledgeable. I know. So yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about Managed Iceberg. So coming into Databricks, Managed Iceberg coming out as a new feature. We're here to kind of just understand it and ask a few questions and kind of just put it in context. And so everyone watching can kind of go, okay, I know what it is. I know why we're using it. I know what it's for. That's what we're trying to get out of today. So, Brito, you got a bit of context for us. You want to kind of walk us through a little bit of context scene setting first, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. We actually came with some slides that kind of talk through it, just the vision and so the problems that we were seeing in the market, and what really drove this really big investment that we're making, particularly coming out of the acquisition of Tabular, which happened last June. So I can
Let me
pull
get
up
those
the
up.
Yeah.
There we go.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I'll start with this presentation really just talking through some of the problems that we were seeing in the market, and really that would be the context that will drive a lot of the features that you're seeing in terms of this roadmap and what we're trying to build out here at Databricks. So first and foremost, I think this should be pretty familiar for a lot of folks that are listening in here. One of the first big challenges that we've seen is what we've been calling table format silos. So this is a pretty common thing that's really happened over the last few years, particularly with the wide adoption of the lakehouse architecture. So a lot of excitement, a lot of folks are investing in this area, customers as well as platforms. The real trouble here, though, is that Delta and Iceberg really became two really leading formats and have really led to this sort of bifurcation in the market where you have certain platforms that have invested more in one versus the other. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see Databricks and Azure Fabric, which really have like big investments in Delta Lake. And on the right-hand side, you see AWS and say Snowflake, which have invested equally in Iceberg. And the difficulty here is it creates this world where for customers or practitioners, you're forced to choose, where you pick a format and you ultimately get a limited part of the lakehouse ecosystem. And this is a problem that we're trying to solve, really allowing you to choose really the best engine or the best tool for the workload rather than have to get pigeonholed into one direction versus another and really get the interoperability. So the second problem, which a lot of folks haven't really hit on just yet, but this is definitely a problem that we've seen a lot of customers bump into, is actually catalog silos. So this is a different layer on top of format silos, where even if you're able to get your data all into one format that all of your engines can talk to, you're really excited about that. You have this second layer problem where different catalogs have different APIs that only certain engines can talk to. This is really particularly important, and particularly in an Iceberg context where Iceberg actually requires a catalog. The catalog plays this crucial role in terms of coordinating commits to a table, as well as then oftentimes driving maintenance on those tables. So the choice of the catalog becomes really important. So if you pick one catalog and you can't connect to all your various engines, you get to this sort of a problem where you have to use maybe multiple catalogs. And then from there, you have this really difficult problem of really data discovery and governance being split across multiple catalogs. So this causes additional problems. What you're seeing here on this slide is it's the general graphic that just shows interoperability between different catalogs and different engines and kind of the current state, where you see a little less green on the page than you'd hope and a lot more red in terms of where there's lack of access. So our solution to these problems here at Databricks is really Unity Catalog, and we really think of Unity Catalog as a way to really unify the lakehouse, and it has this really great surface area that touches on a lot of areas across data and AI, where a lot of catalogs really stop at say access controls and auditing, and maybe they support a single format. Unity Catalog really covers the full suite of things you could have in a lakehouse. So not just access controls and auditing, but really advanced capabilities like lineage, quality monitoring, coverage across not just tables, but all types of objects. So things like AI models, files, dashboards. And then the real big thing we're going to talk about today is really the additional support coming for Iceberg. So you have the ability to have Delta tables, Iceberg tables, any of your legacy formats, things like Parquet, and really interoperability across all of the engines that you could potentially think through and using. So if you think that previous page I just talked to, making everything really green is really, I think, the ultimate vision that we're trying to get to here. So how do we do that?
Cool. So, sorry,
Yeah,
Brito,
please
just
go
going
ahead.
back to that previous slide. Just curious, from your perspective, does this imply or mean that basically when I'm in my environment, whether I have a Parquet table, a Delta Lake table, an Iceberg table, or all these other systems that basically I can just hit UC and then boom, my clients are able to automatically connect to it without any problem with the same governance?
Yeah, that's really the vision here. It's getting to a world where this sort of format choice becomes a lot less of a problem. So whether it's a Delta table or an Iceberg table, you really can connect to any engine, whether it's Delta or Iceberg. So it's really making this distinction between formats lot more meaningless in a way that you can really just think in the concept of, okay, this is just a table. Like I have a managed table and I can connect to it from any sort of client rather than thinking it's managed Iceberg or Delta or whatever. It's just a table in that context.
Oh, I love that. That means whether I'm building my Rust client, right, for example, and that would be accessing, I don't actually really technically need to know between the two anymore. It's just basically, boom, I've got a table, go do my thing now. So,
Exactly. That's really the thread that we're trying to go carry. And you'll see this through some of the slides we have here. It's really trying to get to this world where it's just less decisions you need to make. I think as a practitioner, I think it's
oh, I love that. Yeah, the less decisions that Simon and I have to make, then probably the better, right?
exactly.
Perfect. Well, yes.
Eventually, we can just retire. We'll be fine.
Perfect, perfect. No,
But
no,
not
we
yet.
don't tell anybody that. That's the key thing. We'll just keep doing these videos. That's all we're gonna do. Sorry, I think I just revealed all our plans. That's probably bad.
No,
Sorry, Bruno. Continue on.
no, I'll keep going.
I
Yeah,
completely set this off course. My apologies.
no, please interrupt as much as possible. I think the questions really add to a fruitful conversation. So how do we really do that? So I kind of saw this vision of, hey, regardless of what format you're using, you get this great story of interoperability. How do you really solve that problem in the context of Unity Catalog? So this slide, I think, is like kind of a double click into that question of interoperability, where I'll talk through the top half as well as the bottom half of the diagram you're seeing on the left-hand side. On the top half, the real big change here is the basically a full implementation of the Iceberg REST catalog spec. So at Databricks, we're actually one of the earliest adopters of the Iceberg REST catalog, which for folks who aren't familiar, this is really a nifty part of the Iceberg spec where it really solves this problem of having consistent APIs that different engines can talk to, regardless of the catalog backend. So if you're a catalog, an Iceberg catalog like Unity Catalog is, you can implement these standard open APIs as long as the client, whether it's a Trino, Spark, etc., can talk to those APIs. It's basically invisible what the catalog backend is. It's a unified service, unified surface that you can interact with. So this is really great for folks who are considering like worries about like lock-in and things like that, because open APIs, it becomes really easy to migrate and switch and really plug and play and have much more of a modular architecture. Um, So Databricks actually implemented the read APIs about a year and a half ago at the Data and I Summit. That was one of our bigger announcements, and now we're actually implementing the write APIs as well. So the nice thing about this basically will allow you to use any uh, external client that can speak these APIs. The common ones are things like Kafka Connect, which has a really great Iceberg sync connector, obviously Spark, Trino, Flink. And you can write an Iceberg table directly to Unity Catalog that is managed by UC. And the nice thing about that is it's really accessible again to the whole Lakehouse ecosystem. So the fact that it's a managed Iceberg table really doesn't have too much an impact in terms of what you can actually use with it, because you can read these tables downstream in Databricks. You can interact with it really from any client. So again, bring this unification story in place. And this is a great parallel to the Unity REST APIs, which were actually announced and open sourced at Data and I Summit last year, so last June. So really get this nice world where it's a Delta client or an Iceberg client. You have open APIs that you can connect to for UC to write these managed tables. The bottom half of this page is really the second half of that story. So what we've actually seen a lot in the market is that in order to make us at that page fully green in terms of the interoperability story, you'll have certain engines that only can talk to certain catalogs. So like a great example of this is say like Redshift or Athena, which really they're only able to read from Glue. So if you're using Unity Catalog, how do you still interoperate with those engines? Well, the answer to that is federation and mirroring. These are two capabilities that are also being built out here at Databricks. On the federation side, what that really does is allows you to pull metadata from other catalogs. So you can kind of create this sort of catalog experience where even if you're using other catalogs, you'll have a unified view of all of your data in UC, such that you can interoperate downstream. Cool. Um, these next few slides are really double clicks into a lot of the concepts I just mentioned. So first, looking at managed tables and this ability to have support for both Delta and Iceberg as part of managed tables. The graphic on the left-hand side shows what this really looks like. So again, using any sort of engine that you'd want to use, you can write managed tables that you see, and then any client that can operate these APIs, the Iceberg REST Catalog APIs, can read those tables. So the example here is with Snowflake, which actually has an integration to connect directly to Unity Catalog and read the Iceberg REST Catalog APIs. The nice thing about these tables is that they all benefit from some of the goodies that we have in Databricks. A lot of folks don't want to worry about, say, things like table maintenance. It's kind of a pain to have to do things like expiring old snapshots and compaction, clustering, all these capabilities that I think for some folks, it just really isn't where they want to invest their resources. With managed tables and Databricks, whether they're managed Delta or managed Iceberg tables, they all benefit from a tool called pre-optimization, which handles a lot of this all for you. So it's kind of set it and forget it. You just write to a table, and then from there, we'll handle all the maintenance, making sure that you get excellent read performance downstream and that the storage footprint is actually optimized in a great way. And in this case, you don't have to sacrifice openness because, again, these are all exposed via open APIs. You can get all these great benefits of a managed table as well as have the openness. So it's really the best of both worlds.
And to
Makes
confirm,
sense.
basically, you talk about managed tables, right? That gives you that automatic optimization that we're referring to. This is different from like an external table or like the other table formats like that you referred to, which they do not have that type of optimization.
Exactly. Yeah. So external tables it's really a concept that we've had on the Delta Lake side, where the source of truth for external Delta table is actually the file system itself. So this is something that actually doesn't exist on the Iceberg side. There is no concept of an external Iceberg table because Iceberg actually requires a catalog in all cases. So you either have a managed Iceberg table, or as I mentioned previously, it's we call it actually a foreign table where another catalog is actually the owner of that table. Um, for these external tables on the Delta Lake side, yeah, these don't actually benefit from all the greatness of optimization and things like that. So definitely our recommendation for folks is to move more towards managed tables, just because you still get the openness of an external table, but at the same time, you'd have to worry about all these things that most folks don't want to worry about, which is, I said, like table maintenance and things like that.
So to put it really simply, for people who've previously had that world of going, I've either got an external table, which can be a whole load of different file formats. I've got a federated table or kind of a foreign table kind of pointing to things. Or I've got a managed table, which just in our heads is just Delta. We're not saying Managed Iceberg works in a very different way. It's a whole different thing. It's just now for managed tables, you've got a choice. It's either a managed table that's Delta or it's a managed table that's Iceberg. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Cool. Okay. So talking a bit about federation. So this is, I said, the sort of second half of that story, in which if you have cases where you have to use other catalogs, we're trying to again make sure that things are interoperable at a high level. So this picture kind of shows really the way we see the market really develop, which is the sort of bidirectional federation that's really occurring here. So with Unity Catalog and Snowflake Horizon Catalog, there already is actually a capability for Snowflake to read from Unity Catalog. Um, and we're actually building out some capabilities to actually read from Snowflake Horizon Catalog. So, in cases for customers, it's very common that we see customers that have both Databricks and Snowflake in their architecture, really providing that bidirectional interoperability. And a similar story with Glue Catalog, we see really developing here, where we already have capabilities to federate to Glue, and we expect similar sort of things to happen in the reverse direction. So what does it actually mean to have a foreign catalog within Unity Catalog? So this, what you're seeing here is really the user journey. Just to really double clicking, make it really clear. It's really simple to create these sort of federation connections. So the really three steps. The first step is really what we call creating a connection. This is really creating a secure connection between the two catalogs. From there, it's creating what we call a foreign catalog within UC. So for those folks who've actually used Databricks and gotten into the experience, if you go into say what we call our catalog explorer, which this is the surface that has a really nice UI and you can explore your tables and schemas and catalogs. At the very top, you'll see your UC meta store. And then if you create a foreign catalog, what that will do is it will create basically your federated catalog underneath. So you'll see, for instance, if it was a Glue catalog, you'll see Glue catalog listed out. If you click on that, you'd see all of your schemas and tables, regardless of the format. You'll get all your Delta tables, Iceberg tables, Parquet, etc. Basically, everything that's in your Glue catalog will disappear. And the nice thing about this, I mentioned before, is it solves this problem around data discovery. Because in this case, regardless of the fact that you have these tables in Glue, for a user who uses Databricks or maybe prefers Databricks, they'll have this really nice, clear picture of really everything they can explore. And the really cool thing about this is that you get guaranteed freshness when you're reading these tables, despite the fact that it's in a federated catalog. Because what happens is that when you go to read these tables, so like in step 3 here, what happens is we actually ping the foreign catalog at read time. And this is a really quick operation. All it's doing is actually asking for the pointer to the latest snapshot. So in the case of Iceberg, for folks who really get into the weeds, this is basically the pointer to the Iceberg metadata location, which is like the sort of top of the Iceberg metadata tree. And it says, okay, hey, here's the latest snapshot. From there, when you query the table, you can query the table using entirely Databricks compute. This is just, like I said, it's a quick ping from the other catalog. And then from there, the entire operation is done in Databricks. And I said, you get guaranteed freshness on these tables.
So just to make sure I'm kind of I'm putting it in my head right, because I guess if I'm looking at that going, I assume other people will. We've got federated catalogs already, and that's when you're pointing to another compute source, and that's a push down query. So if I run a query, that goes off something else, some other bit of compute runs the query and then sends the results over. Whereas for foreign catalogs, we're saying actually it's in case of Databricks, the Spark cluster is still going to access the data directly and read it as if it was a local lake, but it's actually getting the metadata at runtime for the catalog. So just difference in terms of federated and foreign. Federated pushes the query down. Foreign still just runs the query on the Spark cluster, but it's got the lookup. Is that fair?
That's a really important distinction. I think for a lot of folks, really, there's a distinction between queries where you have like more of a query pushdown experience. So, if say for instance, if you were querying a table in a proprietary format, we have this concept in Databricks called Lakehouse Federation, which, hey, if you're trying to read, say, a table that is in Snowflake's proprietary format, their native format, you can still read those tables, but because it's in a not an open format, the way that we access that is through this sort of query pushdown. So it'd be Databricks taking parts of the query, giving that to Snowflake. Snowflake will actually run the compute, return the results, and then from there, Databricks will present it to the user. The difficult thing there, though, is that for a lot of folks, this requires compute on both sides, which obviously adds to cost and is a little bit more expensive. If you took that exact same problem and said, okay, instead of using the proprietary format, let's use, say, a Snowflake managed Iceberg table. In that case, it's a completely different experience, because what will happen is that Databricks will just need the pointer to that Iceberg location, not necessarily have to really do anything with Snowflake outside of that. So the experience is a lot cleaner. And from there, you're actually only really using Databricks compute. So it's a bit of a cheaper experience. And like I said, it's in an open format, so you get a lot of interoperability kind of built in.
Makes sense to me.
One really cool concept that we really have been really excited to see the community push for is really format interoperability. So this is, I think, really how the world we're hoping evolves through the open source communities. And this is one thing that we've been really trying to participate with both the Delta and the Iceberg community on. When we started out on this journey of interoperability with things like Uniform like a year and a half ago, the real insight was the fact that these formats actually aren't that different. Like, ultimately speaking, it's Parquet files with a thin layer of metadata on top. And that metadata actually serves very, very similar purposes. It's ultimately the sort of source of truth, handles things like concurrency. There's various features on both sides, just with slightly different names. And all of this, like I said, it's very, very similar, but can lead to really big challenges for customers where there are differences. So one thing that we've been really excited for is through things like upcoming releases, particularly in Iceberg v3, you have all these great new features that have come to Iceberg. And the exciting things about those, not only that they've improved, I think, the experience on the Iceberg side, there are also a handful of features that provide really out-of-box interoperability with Delta Lake. So one great example is deletion vectors. For folks who aren't familiar, deletion vectors really allow you to do things like more of a merge on read approach to writing to tables. So instead of having to actually rewrite every single Parquet file, even if you're just changing a single row, you can write out these delete files that really accelerate, say, merge operations. So it's a really popular feature in Delta Lake. In Iceberg, there was a similar feature called positional deletes, which was in part of Iceberg v2. A lot of the feedback from the community was that these positional deletes made a really tough trade-off between write and read performance. And folks really wanted to improve on that. Well, the solution ultimately was basically taking a similar approach of deletion vectors that exist in Delta Lake. And the nice thing about that, as I said, it improves this experience for Iceberg users, but at the same time provides this out-of-box interoperability because the delete files are actually identical across Delta and Iceberg. So you don't have to rewrite delete files in order to interoperate, and you can use really cool features on both ends, and as I said, get this out-of-box interoperability. And this is a trend that we've seen not just with deletion vectors. Variant data type is another one, geography and geometry data type, as well as row IDs. So we're really, really excited about this push because the goal here is to get to a world where, like, ultimately speaking, you don't have to think about formats. You can just say, hey, I wrote a Delta table, I can read from my Iceberg client and vice versa. And you really don't need metadata translation or things like that to make that feature possible.
But yeah, for me, that's a great message because there's we had the summit last year and the announcements around kind of Databricks going to do more with Iceberg, and we're going to see this future where things come together, and everyone goes, yeah, well, we'll believe it when we see it. And already seeing next version of Iceberg, there's a load of features which is moving that kind of feature parity and talking to each other. The collaboration is the story people wanted to see, and the cynical amongst us are going, oh, cool, it's happening, good. It's all moving in the right direction.
Totally. This is a really exciting stuff because I think ultimately you hit the nail right on the head. I think when you talk about like bringing the formats and interoperability and closer together, folks definitely can be. I think the first insight would be more to be skeptical, and it's really awesome to see things like this in the Iceberg community, and obviously are hoping to see the same in the Delta Lake community as well.
Very cool.
Cool. So I think bringing the whole thing together, this is really the sort of overall vision for Unity Catalog. Where if you remember when I first started, we had that one page where all the various engines and all the various catalogs, and there's a lot of red on the page and lack of interoperability. And what you're seeing here is really a world where you can connect to any engine via open APIs from Unity Catalog, as well as federate to really any catalog. And this is really the direction that we want to go. Uh, Particularly across Delta, Iceberg, and I saw the various legacy formats. So we really think of this as like the most complete solution for data and AI around your governance and discovery, and just really all things you would need from a catalog. Cool. And that's the overall roadmap in terms of things that are coming soon. I think the most important things to in terms of timelines and dates, definitely look forward to Data and I Summit. That's our big summit we have in June. A lot of this stuff will be open and available then, so people can start playing around with it. And we'd love to obviously get everyone's feedback. So please definitely look out for any updates, and there'll be more blog posts coming out soon with more information on this stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, so that alone is given like a huge amount of just context as to things you can do, things you should be thinking about, how you can position it, which is great. Now you guys know this already, but for everyone watching, I've been grilling our guys in advancing analytics, going just ask me your questions as to what do we want to know, which hopefully will represent some questions you guys have. So it'd be good just to take a moment just to talk around some of those things and just some of those pieces that I assume people are asking similar questions, going, but well, what about? And kind of get those. If there's people with further questions, kind of when you're sitting there and we don't cover them, by all means, let us know in the comments, ping us, and we might do a follow up and kind of dig further into your questions, all of that good stuff. But yeah, so we're sitting there. We've got a whole lake full of Delta, and we've been managing it via Unity Catalog. Maybe we've migrated from external into managed, and we're getting predictive optimization, all that good stuff. We are happy that our lake is performant. Should we be looking to move this over to Managed Iceberg? Is that the intention?
No, that's definitely not the intention. So I think I kind of touched on a few of these things throughout the presentation I had. But the idea here, I think, for folks who are already on Delta Lake, I think the North Star that we were really trying to push the community and then the world to is this bringing the formats closer together and having more interoperability out of the box. So if you are a customer that's using Delta Lake, you already have things like, for instance, Uniform that provide interoperability with Iceberg clients. And we're only going to make it easier to use those sort of features, such that it's less knobs, it's less having to think about things. It's, hey, I wrote out a Delta Lake table. Those tables should just automatically be exposed via these Iceberg REST catalog APIs, so that if you have readers downstream with Iceberg, you can access them. And only that experience is only going to continue to get better as you see things like in the Iceberg community, these investments in this interoperability. So like, for instance, things like deletion vectors, this has been a thing that we've wanted a lot for customers to still be able to get Iceberg interoperability, still be able to use deletion vectors. That will be coming very soon with this Iceberg v3 announcement. So if you're using Delta Lake, you should continue to use Delta Lake. It's only going to get easier, I think, to interoperate with the Iceberg ecosystem through a lot of the investments that we're making and seeing from the Iceberg community.
It's a bit of a cheat question because I knew the answer, but just for clarity for everyone at home, right? So I've seen that out in community, right? I've seen people talking about it and going, "Oh, Databricks making noises about using Iceberg more? Maybe they're going to can Delta and move away from it." And obviously, that would be a stupid thing to do, and that's not the grand plan. But just to reassure people is, no, use Delta. There's loads of good features in Delta. It makes sense if you built it in Delta, keep it with Delta. But it's more about cases where if you're using systems that use both, you want interoperability, there's stuff there. If you're starting from scratch, you can make a reasoned decision. And it's about choice. I assume it's about choice for now. And then at some point in the future, if storage is it's all the same and no one actually cares, we won't even think about it. But for now, it's just choice and interoperability. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair way to put it, because ultimately, I think, like I said, if you are using Delta, there's really no reason, I think, to move away from it. There are thousands of customers that are using Delta in production at this point.
Oh.
So it's definitely something that's going to be staying around and moving, and that ecosystem is going to continue to grow. For folks who I think are already have made investments in Iceberg, this is more about trying to meet those customers where they are and provide that interoperability out of box. And I said, in the future, the goal is to get to the way where these distinctions are more and more meaningless, in a way that these two communities really come together. And it really is that true vision of a lake house where you have one copy of your data accessible by any engine. And it's less about this sort of format decision that a lot of folks I think have got hung up over the years.
Yeah, to help clarify one of the things, by the way, is we've seen a lot of the Delta and Iceberg communities interact as it was in the last 6 or 7 years. A lot of us actually came from the Spark community in the first place, so we all know each other to begin with, as it is anyways. And so we just came from slightly different angles. Iceberg, coming from the network's perspective and how they had to build their systems to address their needs. Delta from our perspective, where you hear the stories about Apple and Dom Brzezinski and Michael meeting at Spark Summit or Spark and AI Summit, excuse me, when it was called that then, and solving that. And the reality is that we've been sharing lots of different ideas, both on purpose and not on purpose at the exact same time. And so, as time is progressing, you're going to see more and more of those investments from both sets of communities basically coming out, recognizing the fact that we actually are less interested in having to showcase the differences between our systems and more interested in making sure that the open lake house actually succeeds. So that way people are focusing on the actual problems, which is like there's a value prop, there's a business analytics, there's God forbid LLMs or whatever else that they want to toss in on top of this. They actually want to focus on those problems. So that way we, as a community, whether we're talking about Databricks itself or whether we're talking about the Iceberg and Delta Lake communities, we're actually focusing on actually solving the problem. And so that way they think about this problem less. So.
Totally.
All right. And if someone built a little bit of both, maybe we had like God forbid, a data mesh scenario. We had like a whole Unity catalog federated thing where lots of
don't bring up Databricks with him, Brito. By the way, you can see his starting to agitate right now because of that. So.
But if we had Unity catalog across our data estate, and we got parts of it in Delta, parts of it in Iceberg, and it's a bit of a blend. So we're using both sets of both like managed Delta, managed Iceberg. Are there any challenges you think people are going to have? Are there any gotchas that people should be looking at going, "Ooh, I've got a bit of a blend of these things"?
I think as of right now, I think there are obviously some limitations. I think that we kind of think through, and I think that like the community is really going to help us. I think build and fix a lot of these differences. So I gave you the example previously of like things like deletion vectors, where I think today folks who have tried to use any of these sort of like things like uniform or managed iceberg tables or delta tables with uniform enabled. There are those little gaps and gotchas potentially. But as the two formats, I think, move closer and closer, we're removing a lot of these things. So I think the biggest announcement with Iceberg V3 coming out, I think a lot of limitations that I think folks may have seen in the past will really get smoothed out and go away. So we expect a lot of that to happen over the next couple of quarters for sure.
It's more about kind of how people would go about managing it. You'd have a slightly different operating model for managing your Delta versus your Iceberg, and then eventually that just alternates the same. It's more process. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more process to think about up front. But I said as like a lot of these differences get smoothed out through the community, I think you'll actually effectively be managing your Delta tables the same way as you manage your Iceberg tables. And over time, you really just move away from that distinction.
Ready. I've got the other, maybe slightly meaner because it used to be your baby, Brito, but uniform. What is the future of uniform if we're here? If we're saying like, if you're trying to do real interoperability where you can read it and write it, then you go for managed Iceberg and you can kind of surface it through file catalog, etc. Why would you now, if you had Delta, turn uniform on? Like, is there still a use case where you see people using uniform in those scenarios, or would you kind of advise they switched over to managed Iceberg to get the full kind of read-write feature set?
No, I think it's a great question. And yeah, obviously, uniform has always been my baby. I've been the PM for quite some time. And I think the vision for uniform is really to make uniform obsolete. I think that's like really the goal here. Where I do love it. It was something we started and announced. We're really proud of all the work that we did behind it. But like the goal is to basically work itself out of a job through these sort of efforts around interoperability. So if you are using Delta Lake, I would definitely recommend to continue to use uniform because it's the sort of the cleanest way, I think, to really expose a lot of your tables to the Iceberg community. But over time, what we're going to do is really make it more and more seamless. So the idea first, I think, is to say, hey, can we make it a world where there's no knobs to really enable uniform, such that we can take really implicit signals from like how you're actually using these tables to really determine which tables need this sort of iceberg interoperability. So again, it's less of something you have to really think about from your platform team, and then making sure your downstream users can actually get the interoperability they need. And then ultimately through these sort of investments and seeing this sort of community remove a lot of these sort of differences in the formats, getting to a world where ultimately, if I have a Delta table, it can just be read via an Iceberg client without metadata translation. So that's the goal. Like you can really see that uniform layer just becoming thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner over time. But that's really the vision for now. But for customers who are already using it, definitely think you should continue to, and you should really start to see that experience become more and more seamless and less of having to think about it.
And speaking of having to think about it, obviously that's a big message on the Delta side. We had an announcement last month, where we're seeing the automated liquid clustering starting to appear. So we've got kind of predictive optimization. So we're saying you've got your Delta table, you don't need to think as much about managing it over time, and we're seeing more features going in there, and it's going to optimize itself, and it's going to look at it and figure out the optimization and all that kind of stuff. And I guess that kind of feeds into the is there anything that's what are the big features that we're waiting to see in Managed Iceberg that aren't in the next V3? So if someone's looking at things like liquid clustering and going, oh, but I don't have that feature, is that kind of similar ideas, or would they not even worry about that because there'll be a different level of predictive optimization, and even if it optimizes it in a different way, why do they care? Because it's managed via that level. Kind of how does that look? I mean, in terms
Yeah,
of things that people would be missing.
no, it's a fantastic question because so with managed iceberg tables, we're trying to make sure that ultimately speaking, these tables have all the great secret sauce of Databricks. So this isn't something where we're bifurcating the platform and okay, if you choose Delta, you get these features. If you choose Iceberg, you get those features. Managed Iceberg tables will work with everything within Databricks. So all the great sort of cool tooling that we have within Databricks, all the great platform features like pre-optimization, no, you mentioned, those will work with Managed Iceberg tables. And then a lot of the cool capabilities that we actually have with Delta Lake, we're also bringing to Managed Iceberg table. So liquid clustering is a great example. I think the direction that we want to move in is really pushing liquid clustering for all managed tables, and really get into a world, I said, particularly the automatic clustering, where you don't have to actually choose the clustering keys yourself. So this is a huge leap from the old world of partitioning, where partitioning, you're thinking about, okay, well, let me predict the future in terms of what my query patterns are going to be and pick the right partitioning scheme, and then hope that my users don't change their minds a year from now. Getting into a world where you don't have to actually make those.
Yeah, that happens all the time, by the way. We
Yeah,
all
happens
stay
literally all
exactly
the
the same.
time.
We never change anything. Perfect.
Yeah, happens all the time. Exactly. So with Iceberg, these problems obviously still exist. Same way they exist for Delta Lake. So getting to a world where you can use liquid clustering on these managed Iceberg tables, they'll still be open and accessible by any engine you can use, but really having a differentiated experience for Iceberg is not just what you get out of box and open source. It's really that plus some of these cooler features that I think folks who've been using Delta Lake have been really benefiting for some time.
It's a good argument. It does take away the not having to figure out what your users are going to query makes me sad, because I've used it as an argument with engineers so many times, saying, have you asked your users what they're going to do? They're like, oh no, like maybe you should go and speak to the business a little bit more. It's just a conversation I keep having, and this is just well, they don't have to anymore, because now it'll optimize itself. So why bother speaking to the business?
Totally.
Don't worry. I'm more than sure we've introduced new problems for you.
Yeah, there'll be new problems. There'll be new problems for sure.
There's always new problems.
Yeah, just to add with that, by the way, there's already lots of little projects. For example, some of the obvious ones are, for example, the integrations of Unity Catalog. We already having various Iceberg folks contribute directly into UC. We also have a lot of work that's being shared, for example, with the Delta Rust community, directly with the Iceberg Rust community, specifically on these learnings. So there's a lot of back and forth that's going on. So even I'm wearing like an Iceberg t-shirt. You might not be able to read it, but basically that's an Iceberg t-shirt, right? And so, yeah, like from where we're coming from, just to piggyback off what Brito was talking about, we've already invested very heavily, always have invested very heavily in open source. But the reality is, just like we're continuing to invest in what's great about the community, great about open source, is just as much as we're providing like our context and our thought processes or our learnings to the Iceberg community. Iceberg community is also providing a lot of their context to us, and we're learning a lot of really good things. And that's actually the whole purpose of open source, right? We get to learn from each other and realize, hey, this was a great idea. Let's continue to do this. Oh, this was a bad idea. Let's never do that again, right? So we're learning a lot from each other, and that's actually the heart of this all, right? Like, so people are wondering, like, are we investing? It's like, yeah, of course we are, like, because we get to learn from each other, and that's the great the most amazing facet about this whole thing. So yeah, so just want to put that little tidbit in. Sorry.
Well, amazing. I think that's probably all we got time for. But yeah, massive thanks for you guys kind of coming on and just helping put all that in context. And sounds like we're doing some exciting stuff. Any parting comments for the viewers?
No, it was great. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome to kind of talk to what we're thinking about and really the vision that we see for open table formats here at Databricks. So yeah, really appreciate the invite to come talk to you guys.
And of course, make sure you come to Data and AI Summit. Simon, myself, and Brito, we're all going to be there, so you can go ahead and cost us for all the things we've been talking about.
Awesome. Alrighty. And there you have it. Managed Iceberg now in Databricks. You can go and have a play. You can create those Managed Iceberg tables or Managed Delta tables or a bit of both. You now, hopefully, all of your questions have been answered. If you've got questions that weren't answered in that long meandering interview, then feel free to pop them down in the comments below. Let us know actually what you really want to know, and I'll pass it back to the guys. And if we get enough, we'll do a follow-up and we'll ask more questions. Also, as Denny mentioned, don't forget we'll be at the Data and AI Summit over in June in San Francisco. Again, we'll be talking about stuff. Feel free to come over and ask us lots of questions then. And otherwise, just don't forget to like and subscribe. All right. Cheers all.